In all of Thomas's life, including his years of travel in and out of Terran-occupied space, as both a contract and freelance engineer, he had never been to a production world before. Yet here he stood on the observation deck of the interplanetary shuttle, gazing out over an endless field of sleek black metal pillars, belching flames into the sky, with millions of laborers and machines working nonstop to forge a myriad of different devices and pieces of what would one day be warships and orbital stations. There was a beauty to the fluid motions below, a beating heart that held the rhythm of the endless churning of mills and conveyors. As much as he desired to watch the hypnotic display of ever-pulsing fabricators, he knew that the dock below would soon see that they land and disembark. A voice from behind him confirmed his intuition in a familiar tired sigh. "The captain says that we will be tethering in 5 minutes, and not a moment sooner." Thomas turned around only to find himself a few short inches away from the speaker, or more accurately, the tire they were wearing. Correcting his gaze, he instead locked eyes with the winged Horalaon that he was assisting more frequently. Mavu blinked slowly, her expressionless stare being universally translated to a feeling of disdain for traveling. He made a note of how she looked a shade or two lighter and in an odd way somewhat orange. "That's not too bad. How are you holding up? Jump sickness aside?" Mavu responded by making a bleg sound while finding a seat by the window. From her inside pocket, she retrieved a small package of chalky blue tablets, from which she released 2 into her mouth and crunched them in her teeth. "I don't get it, Tom. How come every species of the Syndicate has some magic cure-all for mundane illnesses, except for mine? Your people were able to get rid of jump sickness after just a year of having stable jump drives. And yet it's been over 100 for us, and I'm stuck taking anti-acid tablets, so I hopefully don't make a mess." All he could do was shrug and sit next to her, an offering of a simple water flask in his hands. He didn't say it, but her teeth were now covered in blue specks. "I don't know. My money is on it being a medical knowledge thing. We were able to narrow down the cause and effect fairly quickly because we had already cracked our own genome sequence some 20 years before FTL. And that was after a few centuries of tearing it down piece by piece. I mean, no offense when I say this, but wasn't it only 200 years ago when your species was shot from the pre-industrial age right into science fiction by a crashed spaceship? Accidental uplift business is messy, and it can't help that of all things, it was a warship that crashed and not something good like a research vessel or a cargo cruiser. Your species just hasn't had the time to figure it out yet." Mavu simply scoffed as she downed the entire bottle in one breath. "No offense taken, especially since you're right. One downed Aussie ship with an advanced AI inside sent our technological progress in the weapons department forward by thousands of years, but left us culturally and socially inept in things like medicine or philosophy. We're lucky that the GTS stepped in and stopped us from using WMDs to settle clan disputes. They tried so hard to get us to calm down and think rationally, even as we blindly fired missiles at them. It's only through sheer unwavering kindness that we managed to integrate it all. We cannot say that it has been smooth going, but at least we have made progress." Her wings seemed to shudder for a moment, causing her to glance at the entrance door. Not a moment later there came a hiss as the pressure-sealed doorway unbolted from the bulkhead and swung inside. From across the PA came a deep rumble that was supposedly the voice of their captain. "All passengers, you may now disembark the vessel." The 2 of them got up from their seats and followed the small crowd that was shuffling out of the door, both ensuring that all of their belongings were on hand. From there it was only a short walk down a hallway and 2 flights of stairs until they were outside in the remarkably chilly air, where they already had an automatic shuttle waiting for them. Few words were exchanged between them on the ride to their temporary lodging, which was a decent hotel room with galactic standard amenities, or on the ride to the site of their interview at the local bureau office. Despite being on a planet nearly 300 light-years away, the building was almost exactly the same on the inside. Soon enough, they both entered the interview chamber, though by Mavu's watch they were early and could rest for a moment. The past few hours had been taxing for the large woman, and she could hardly wait for this order to be over. She rubbed a hand at the space between her eyes, her head pounding from the stress. A hand wrapped around her arm that was lying on the table, which was none other than Thomas's. Are you going to be all right? You've been pale since we landed and rubbing at your head for a while now. Honestly, I'm not sure. Usually the worst of these symptoms passes after an hour or so, but this instance is persistent to say the least. Perhaps I'm actually coming down with something. Thank you for your concern, my friend. She couldn't help but give him a weak smile. Humans were respected for their compassion and empathy for all others, even strangers, so having one show concern was somehow refreshing compared to the usual attitude of other races. Thomas frowned as he pulled his data pad out from his pocket. One quick inquiry to the Galactic Information System, and he had answers to his questions. His posture softened as he turned the screen so she could see. Check it out. You can safely take some human medicine. A couple headache pills and an antihistamine should get you right and peppy. From his personal bag, he produced these exact items and took out the recommended dose the website suggested. Mavu noticed that the page was from the Terran Medical Information Branch of their government. Despite the sheer absurdity of it, she trusted that the pills were harmless. How is it that your kind knows more about every other species than even they know, and why? We usually ask for volunteers to participate in non-invasive scans whenever they want to visit the surface of one of our core worlds. And sometimes during medical checkups and doctor's visits, we offer them a complimentary scan for planet-side pathogens and immunology tests, then ask for permission to keep the data for future reference. The more you know about your friends, the easier it is to take care of them, patch them up, cater to diets, and make programs for nanotech mattresses so they can sleep easier. As for how we know more, we just had to learn the hard way about the dangers of unprotected first contact. That's why Terran medical scanners are second to none. We never want to be caught off guard again. The logic was sound, though something in the back of her mind remained convinced that there was an ulterior motive of nefarious design. There was a bit of worry in her mind as she thought of the possible ways such medical insight into the inner workings of every species could be misused, such as the development of bioweapons or training soldiers on where to shoot creatures in order to rupture vital organs. This thought didn't last as a sudden wave of relief cascaded through her. Every bit of fatigue, dizziness, and nausea was washed away by an oddly cool sensation, as well as a strange licorice taste suddenly making itself known. I feel better. Just what was in those pills? He chuckled while giving her a warm smile. Nothing I wouldn't take myself anytime I get a migraine. The trick is in the nanites, made to distribute the meds as quickly as possible, while also ensuring that the effect remains for the full 10 hours. They also serve a few other purposes, especially if you have a medical implant for monitoring vitals, or to automatically flush the medicine out of you if they detect an overdose or negative reaction. Not exactly a miracle cure-all, but it's what I have on hand. The idea of a self-regulating medicine was an alien concept for Mavu. Her own clutchmates still relied on herbs and natural remedies, or in some cases expensive surgery to regain their health. She nodded a silent thanks to her friend, since she could feel the approach of someone beyond the opposite entryway. 3 knocks came from the metal-plated door before a rather bulky Kujon strode into the room. She was perhaps just as tall as Thomas, though roughly 3 times as wide due to her dense musculature. Her single oily black eye rolled around in its socket as she surveyed the room and its occupants. A look of irritation smeared across her pale lips. With a single motion, she pulled the chair across from the interviewers around herself and planted herself firmly on its cushioning. Mavu had only just opened her mouth to speak when the woman across from her cut her off with a vaguely Slavic accent. Rishin Turnacht, District 108 Production Overseer, reporting for government-mandated case assessment regarding one of my current contracts. I would appreciate it if you could get through this as quickly as possible. Though her attitude was far from professional, Mavu was duty-bound to maintain her business appearances. All emotion vanished from her features as she addressed her equally impassionate client. I hereby invoke the right of justifiable honesty and information integrity. As per the laws of governance, you are to swear an oath of honesty and integrity. Any misinformation of deceit will be used against you in a multi-species court of law. Penalties may incur a sentence of 20 to 30 solar rotations within Penal Colony J33035, a fee of no less than 10 million United credits, and demeritment and social outcasting per your release. Please confirm your understanding and vow. Understood. I vow to be honest, and I accept these terms. Let's get this over with. Mavu nodded to Thomas, who accessed the network for the interview chamber. This particular office did not have an independent intelligence matrix like the one where they had met, so the functions of the facility had to be activated manually. A few rapid keystrokes later, the room began to shift and clunk as devices of every kind deployed in a wide arc around the center table. Thomas gave a thumbs up, a sign that everything was now operating. Mavu looked back to Regan and began her questioning. Miss Turanocht, I require you to explain in your own words the details of your current production contract held with the Irenthal Dominion military forces. State the product, the nature of its creation, and the export rate. The Kojian rolled her eye in frustration as she practically growled out the words she spoke. Oh, I knew that contract was Burikag the moment I saw it. She paused for a moment as she took a deep breath. The deal is held by one of their Blue Crown nobles, though I cannot say which due to confidentiality clause. They vanted a steady supply of nanite bullets, the kind that eats the armor of big targets and the structure of buildings all the same. Our lines assembled these rounds per their specifications, using the older Model 9 nanites housed within 25mm tungsten casing propelled by electronic magnet rifle. We make more than 100,000 shells per 5-cycle week, in addition to the rifles and cannons that fire them. Mavu gestured to Thomas, who had taken from his briefcase a small vessel containing one of these shells, as well as his holo projector displaying the torn-down assembly of both weapon and ammunition. He handed the shell to the woman across the table, then set about configuring the rest of his display silently as Mavu continued the interview. Is the object now in your possession a product of your facility? She took hold of the tungsten bar and rotated it until she had observed every surface. Undoubtedly, the rear of the round bears our company mark, as well as the pointed tip made for armor-piercing properties that Viv were asked to include despite being unnecessary. This one is unused, though I can tell that the nanites are no longer inside. She tapped the shell against the edge of the table with a hollow thunk, then set it on its side in front of her. Thomas eyed the round carefully, then produced a folder from his case and pulled a page from it. Continuing along this line of questioning, might I inquire as to what components these rounds use? My documents here confirm the exact payload weight and items found within, but I need to hear in your own words what pieces were used. Richen's eye narrowed as they looked at the human, though she remained calm and civil despite her glowering. As I said, per their specifications, they made the shells as they asked. 1 control module, 1 main power system, and 1 director chip with each swarm of nanites. Before you ask, yes, test were done on these shells to ensure they worked even after impact. There should be no issue there. With a huff, she crossed her arms and pouted as the agents took notes. Mavu glanced to Thomas in the case he had, and when she got an approving nod, she reached into the protective carrier and extracted 2 more of the tungsten rods that were in varying states of disassembly. One appeared to have been cut into from the side and was missing a length of its outer shell extending from the front end to the rear end, while the other appeared to be heavily bent and deformed as though it had made impact at high speed on its pointed end and flattened out. She placed the 2 rounds beside the first with a video projector behind them, then with a slight frown turned her attention to the woman across from her. Miss Turanocht, would you please take a look at these items and tell me what they are? The stocky alien took the new objects and inspected them thoroughly, narrating her observations on the damaged shell first. They're more of our ammunition. This one had already been used and looks like it hit a very hard surface. Nanite deployment was successful, as evident by the holes in the flat side of this shell. As for this one, it is just one of our products that had been cut open. She slid the rounds back towards Mavu, her expression becoming more irritable. Everything looks fine. Why even ask me about this? Finger interlocked with one another, Mavu locked her eyes onto the singular eye of the cycloptic being before her. I would ask that you inspect this evidence again and put more attention towards the inner workings of the shell that has been opened. A look of confusion crossed Richen's face, but Mavu remained stoic and silently made it clear that this wasn't actually a request. Muttering to herself, the overseer snatched up the opened shell and proceeded to push her fingers into the open shell through the gel-like mass of dormant nanites. Suddenly, her hands stopped, and she had to speak aloud what it was she was thinking. There is the battery, and there is the control nexus. There is the director chip. A realization of what this meant hit her, and she slowly set the round back on the table with a heavy sigh. Oh, Burut Kug. Yes, that is the issue we find ourselves facing today, Miss Turanocht. Mavu reached forward and placed a finger on the video player, activating the device and causing a green-blue screen to appear in the air right above the table. On the screen was a collection of still images of buildings and vehicles lying in ruin, drenched in a shimmering silver liquid that was the nanites. Beside the images was a video file playing a replay of the liquid tearing its way through everything it made contact with. Then, as it found more of itself spilled on the ground, it would surge forth from that spot with renewed vigor. Thomas, could you explain what is happening in these files? The human looked up from his file and hastily explained. Rampant nanite swarms. When active, nanites operate on the programmed path of destroying everything they make physical contact with that is larger than a certain size. Then when they either run out of power or get the shutoff code, they all return to being dormant until recollected or reprogrammed. Loose nanites that are connected to the powered swarm and given power through contact activate and join the swarm, potentially causing a cascade event. Mavu nodded her thanks, then took hold of the cut, open shell from the table. Miss Turanocht, as I am led to believe there is a component from this shell that is missing. Could you... She was cut off by Riken, who hastily spat out an explanation in a thick tone of annoyance. The director chip is missing, which meant that the nanites never disengaged. The director carries the shut-off code and tells the nanites then to stop, even if they still have power and are destroying a target. One of the overseer's hands was now covering her singular eye, rubbing at the eyelid in frustration. Without the director, the shell is a hazard, I know this. There was a brief pause as Mavu set the 3 shells back in their case. Then she resumed undeterred. As per the regulations of micro-robotics technology, any and all forms of nanomachine ammunition that do not contain a self-deactivation program or mechanism that renders spent munitions inoperable or inactive are considered to be weapons of mass destruction, terror weapons, and environmental safety hazards. Were these weapons to continue production and distribution to be used in conflicts, the unreclaimed nanites these rounds carried would pose an extreme risk to all life and potentially cause a Class 7 global extinction event in the worst of scenarios. Do you require me to outline the legal punishments that come with resumed production and distribution of these weapons? The overseer closed her eye and took in a deep breath, her words afterwards becoming tense, filled with frustration and pain. No, thank you. I know already. She took a moment to calm herself while also awaiting her interviewers to speak again. Then, after opening her eye and looking between them, she pushed the conversation back their way. I do not understand, though. What happened to the components? I have been assured by my district heads that we have plenty of parts for the rounds. Mavu was about to speak when Thomas intervened. I'd like to explain this one, Mavu, if I may. Mavu nodded her confirmation before the human turned to face the one-eyed alien. The Bureau looked into this case in depth before we were dispatched, and it seems that your client has been bribing one of your management team to have the director chips removed during final inspection. These chips are probably having their serial numbers rearranged after removal, then put back into the system to be installed again. Hence why you're probably seeing a discrepancy in the ordered units in the supplied ammo. I'm sure you're familiar with the terms crap skimming, where you take old parts and sell them as new. This falls under that same mindset, though in this instance it seems more like the client wants a more volatile and harder to disable nanotech weapon. The Kojian woman nodded solemnly as she crossed her arms over her chest. An illegal weapon, one that I would take the blame for. Is that right? Correct, Mavu stated flatly, her eyes lingering on the case holding the 3 sample shells. In cases like these, it is commonplace for wealthy and influential individuals to manipulate documents and low-ranking employees to shift the evidence towards the highest-ranking member of management to taking responsibility. However, in this instance, the case was opened due to the property damage caused by the private military forces of your client. Thus, the investigation started with the culprit and not the scapegoat, I believe the human term is. She glanced to Thomas to see if this was correct, and upon seeing his subtle wink, she smirked in reply. Rickon blinked a few times as the information processed in her mind. Then when she understood what this meant, her face brightened slightly. You mean that Skeshkish Blue Crown was trying to pin the blame on me, but was caught regardless? Good. That is what his kind deserves. She paused for a moment to look at the cases still laid out in front of the agents. Then a new realization hit her, and her features darkened more than they were before her momentary joy. But what of the contract? We still have many tons of nanites left and 1 million shells on order. That is vast wealth lost if it falls through. Mavu anticipated that Thomas wished to be the one to bear good news, so before he even asked, she nodded her approval to him. Thomas straightened his glasses with his right hand as he withdrew a stack of forms from his case with the left. Actually, there's something of a deficit of nanites in other applications besides war, and the Bureau would like to offer you some buyers that will offer you an equal price to the contract that you're about to cancel. This first document is a contract nullification waiver that has already been signed by one Crown Prince Kukenerom and is waiting on your signature. The next page is a summarized list of potential buyers in construction and agriculture businesses that are cleaning up the mess the prince made. Then the last page is a waste disposal site that's always hunting for older gen nanites to fill their vats with, as well as a shipyard that needs tungsten plates for ship repairs. The overseer was speechless as she flipped through the pages, but despite her inability to communicate verbally, she still reached for the pen lying in front of her and signed the waiver before eagerly sliding it back to Thomas. Slowly, she managed to rein herself in from her amazement to the point where she could articulate properly. Then as she met the gaze of the agents across from her, she bowed her head in reverence. Thank you. I will never forget your kindness. Thomas was tempted to answer, but the imposing form of Mavu looming over him as she rose from her seat told him that he ought to let her wrap things up. Mavu stood at full attention with her arms held behind her back, then turned to the opaque wall that housed the cameras and sensors to announce the end of the interview. If you have no comments or statements to declare, then this concludes our interview. Thank you, Miss Turnuk. You may leave now. Please report to the administrative office of your place of employment for further assistance and a means to contact the Bureau support agencies. Following her words, Rickon tucked the papers given to her under her arm and departed, the cameras and arrays dangling from the ceiling detecting her departure and retracting as they were programmed to. The two agents collected their belongings and packed their cases, then departed the building in order to catch the scheduled shuttlecraft that would take them back to their hotel room. While aboard the craft, Mavu repeatedly scanned the full height of her friend. Then with a soft laugh, she nudged her foot against his knee, earning her a startled, "What's up?" from Thomas. You did well today, Tom. Fieldwork suits you more than I anticipated, and your handling of case information was efficient. Thank you for your hard work. She reached out a hand to him and smiled, and when he took it, she sighed with relief. You've become a skilled agent, my friend, and I look forward to working by your side more often. Thomas returned her smile and her sentiments. Same here, Mavu. This whole casework deal is 100 times better than I thought it'd be, if only because my partner is the great Mavu of laws. Mavu knew he was sarcastic and prodded his chest in response, causing him to laugh while tossing himself back into the shuttle chair. You know, all this talk of tiny robots makes me want a big meal. Want to get a few pizzas and binge-watch the last season of Duel of Dragons? After we write up our report, that is? Mavu pondered for a moment, then shrugged. Although it goes against my better judgment, I suggest a different course of action. We can watch the remainder of that silly show of yours tonight and fill out the report on the ride home tomorrow. The human's jaw was hanging wide open in mock surprise. Dear me, Mavu prioritizing relaxation before work? It must be the end times. Quickly, grab hold of something before we suddenly crash. His second instance of sarcasm in the shuttle was met with a firmer, more pointed jab from her wing this time, but also a smile to match his. Hush, or this will be the last time we ever perform fieldwork together. She watched his reaction to ensure that her own lie was understood, and when he rolled his eyes and began smiling out the window, she nodded to herself with glee. She was happy to have a human friend, especially one that allowed her to be more than the mavu of laws she once was. She too found herself staring out the window of the shuttle as it streaked through the sky over the ever-sprawling factories and foundries below, a soft smile on her face.